This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Happy New Year and welcome to the Forest Ramble podcast for 2020. After a year in which Forest were in 8th place overall in the Championship with 67 points. Welcome to the Maradona the Midlands.
Hello.
And Stephen Topless.
Hello.
And Happy New Year to you both. Well, after what looked like a fairly gloomy December, the fabled curse, Stephen, did Sabri turn that around at the end there?
Yeah, he got 2 wins in before the new year. Good wins as well. Away at Hull and then at home to Wigan. Important wins.
When you say a good win.
Yeah, a good win. The second one was more good of where it put us in the table rather than how we achieved that victory. But no, that was a good way to end 2019 and then carry that on with a third win on the spin in New Year. It's put Forest in a very strong position now going into January in the transfer window. Yeah.
Maradona the Midlands, were you worried about the December curse prior to the last week or so?
I was, but I gained a little bit of confidence when I saw Samba Sow back fit again. And I saw these as 3 winnable games. They weren't as difficult as games we could have had. So I was relatively confident that we could get something out of him.
Well, you've mentioned Samba Sow.
Yeah, you think of Samba Sow as a defensive midfielder, but he's actually a lot more than that. He starts sort of taking the ball off opposition players well into the opposing half. He's not like a traditional defensive midfielder sitting deep in his own half. He goes up and harries and hassles and just nicks it off players. So he just doesn't give the opposition any time on the ball to sort of weigh up their passes or build up an attack or any momentum. And then also when he's on the ball, he's very good at just playing the ball into space in front of the Forest players. So I remember he did it quite a few times with Matty Cash, and that made Matty Cash run onto the ball and take it forward, and that builds forward momentum from the Forest perspective. When you see good players at the very, very top clubs, that's one thing you always notice. Always play the ball in front of their teammates. They're always running onto the ball and adding pace into the attack. And I think it really showed in that whole game, and it just showed how important he was. When he was clearly injured after the goal, but they tried to keep him on for more or less the rest of the first half.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about his importance when it comes to tactics, because we did see some tactical adjustments, shall we say. But we'll talk a bit more about that in a little while. And against Wigan, is that the reason why Forest were more disjointed? Because Samba Sow wasn't there? Yeah,
that's part of the reason. Tiredness also was a factor, I think. And Wigan just played well as well, I think. You have to give them credit. They sort of came into it and they showed against Birmingham as well in their next game that they can play well and get results now. They seem to have got a way of playing again.
Yeah, and it was a difficult watch. Being in the stadium as well, the atmosphere really was flat. And it's a two-way thing. You need the fans to get behind the team, but you also need the team to give the fans a reason to get behind them. So that probably didn't help either, and the fact that Forest were quite laboured in their performance. It was a tough game, but the crucial thing was Lolley came on in the second half, so too did Silva, and it gave Forest a bit more attacking impetus, and it was Lolley who won the corner with a run down the left-hand side. He won the corner that was put in, and Figueiredo got his head on it and got the winning goal. And the most positive thing about that game was not only the fact that we won, but when you looked at the results that came in at 10-5 that afternoon, Forest went back into the playoffs with a bit of a cushion because of it. Because teams around them had lost, and even though it wasn't a great performance, that could prove to be one of the biggest, in terms of 3 points, one of the biggest wins of the season.
Well, it's a well-known fact, isn't it, that clubs need to be able to play well, but you also need to be able to win when you're not playing well if you're going to be successful. And that's the mark of what teams need to be able to do. I also think that the fact that Forest ground out that result, well, that's the kind of match that they would have lost couple of weeks previously. So it suggests that, I mean, we talked about it in the last podcast and you just mentioned it there. I think the players were a bit knackered, to be honest.
What was that? And also, it was a slightly odd team selection from Sabri. Well, not selection, but where he was playing some of the players. Carvalho was playing sort of wide left and Samido was in the centre, where naturally you'd think they'd probably be better off switching positions. You could use Samido's athleticism on the wing, helping to defend and get forward from there, and Carvalho's cleverness on the ball behind the striker. So I think that contributed also to a disjointed performance.
Because against Hull, of course, Samido was nominally on the left, wasn't he? And then kind of swapping with Thiago Silva.
And it worked as well. It was an effective tactic to use where you're just swapping the two of them over. And against Hull, it just didn't. Against Wigan, it wasn't quite as effective. And I think, no, Lolley and the team definitely affected things because he put in a really hard-working display at Hull, and his running and his graft on that right wing was a real important way of how Forest approached that whole game. And
in the last 3 games, we've seen the Joe Lolley of last season, haven't we?
Definitely.
So I mean, I've just got up on the screen here that there's an interview with Joe Lolley where he was talking about second season syndrome. He's saying about it's been tough and it's been frustrating because he'd like to be able to, sort of be able to get to that standard of performance, and he hasn't quite managed it at any stage. The last 2.5 matches, if we put it that, I mean, against Hull, he was terrific without necessarily getting the chance to create too much, but he was showing that level of athleticism. He was dovetailing really well with Matty Cash, and that was a very important part of Forest's play there.
And also, he does tend to get kicked every single game. He's always like 2 or 3 times every game, but he's down in pain. And then that sort of people have sort of woken up to him this season, sort of targeted him a bit.
Yeah.
And,
well, in the first part of the season, he was getting double marked, and then the next sort of period of the season, like you say, and it's something that Steve Hodge constantly mentions in his commentary, isn't it? It's like Lolley's down again. It's because he gets kicked so much on the ankles.
Yeah.
Price you pay for being a dribbler, I suppose. So let's talk tactics then. Baz made a point in his match report against Blackburn that Forest were playing in a different way. They were playing more on the front foot. So the formation was the same, but the style of play, the tactics were more progressive, shall we say, especially important in a home match. And also it meant that we could use the wings better. And again, Lolley and Amiobi were crucial to Forest getting the goals.
Yeah, I think, also Samba Sow was back in the team. So I think whenever he's in the team, we're always pressing a little bit more.
Well, and as you said, though, that ability he has to win the ball and then pass it forwards into space. So if you are a winger or an overlapping fullback, then that's what you like, isn't it?
Sure. But I think even in that game, though, it was still... It suited us because Blackburn had the majority of possession again. So it was a little bit more like an away game again for us, where we sort of let them have the ball for large periods of the game and then hit them on the break. The second goal especially, the first goal, and the third goal. Actually, all the goals, when I think about it, they're all pretty much on the break. So I think it helped us in that respect that Blackburn sort of played into our hands slightly as well.
Well, and this is something we've seen a lot, isn't it? So when you're playing against a footballing team, to a certain extent, let them do what they want because we know that we'll be able to catch them out. And I think that's where Forest, in their dip in form, were struggling a bit because Grabban had looked very, very isolated, hadn't he, as a centre forward, and Forest hadn't been able to make that forward progress. And again, I wonder if that's connected to Samba Sow being missing.
Yeah, there was a lot in games where when Forest had the ball, they were it was passing to feet, and it was okay, it looked okay, but there was no real penetration with it, and there hasn't been enough people willing to run into space or play the ball into space and work and create chances that way. So I think we will come on to this later when we talk about targets and signings for January, but I think it does highlight that Forest are still a little bit short in some areas. Nothing wrong with that. It's probably taken the 25 or so games that we've had to identify, those weaknesses and where we do need to improve. Same from Lamouchi's point of view. So now we're in a position, hopefully, where we can go and address that and become a team that has more than one or two strings to our bow, and we've got different ways of beating the opposition.
We've talked about it before. I will just reiterate once again. Every time Forest have had the majority of possession, they've lost the match.
Yeah.
It's not coincidence, is it?
No, I think teams that just know they can let them have it, and then they haven't necessarily got the cutting edge. If you're sitting deep, they haven't got that sort of ability to break.
And the Cardiff match was probably the best example of that.
There was, in the Cardiff match, they had plenty of the ball around the Cardiff box, and there was a statistic of 32 shots, but they weren't really shots. No. They were just hitting the ball from distance, and they were getting blocked at source. So it was just that clever little reverse pass, a little ball in between, behind a full back, things like that, which is just. We lack the cleverness to do something. Even though we've got Silva and Carvalho, and we hoped they'd provide that this season, it doesn't seem to have borne fruits very often.
I think Carvalho... Well, let's talk about Carvalho. There's speculation, isn't there, Stephen, that he may be on his way. Before we come on to that, I will say two things. So, number one, it's not been widely reported, but I believe that Forest have been paying Carvalho's transfer fee at €3 million per season. So we still owe nearly €10 million on him. Presumably that will have an impact upon whether he's allowed to go and whether that's on a permanent, and if it is on a permanent, what the transfer fee needs to be so that Forest can recoup some of that money. What are your views on Raul Carvalho this season?
This season he hasn't really made much of an impact. And I don't know if that comes back to pre-season when he got that injury at Alfreton in the friendly. Maybe he would have been in the team from the start and made more of an impact, but as it was, he was injured for the first few weeks of the season. And then when he's come back in, he's played a bit part, and then, as we've spoken about already, he's been played on the left-hand side, on the left wing. But I wouldn't say he's been used in his ultimate position, which is as a number 10, behind the striker, getting on the ball and looking to create. So is it a case that he just doesn't fit into a Sabri Lamouchi system?
I was going to say,
or is it because
Sabri doesn't play with a number 10?
No. Or is it a case of Carvalho just isn't up to it at championship level and maybe he needs to move on because it hasn't quite worked out for him at Forest? I suppose that is the argument. I've said before on the podcast, I think I would keep hold of him. I think he's more of an asset that Forest should be holding on to, and that there will be games this season where he'll come into his own. And even in amongst this sort of indifferent form, look at the QPR game where he comes off the bench and scores an absolutely fantastic goal, full of creativity and ingenuity, and that's what he can give you.
Maradona the Midlands, he talked about his transfer fee in our last podcast, and saying, well, maybe we need to acknowledge that we paid a lot, maybe a bit too much for him. But as we've got him, he's an asset, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think the problem we've got is that if he plays, you have to have players around him who do the work, the defensive work for him. I think why Sabri prefers Silva is because he will work back and get some tackles in, which just isn't Zhao's game. He's just not physically built that way. So, in essence,
that's what happens when when he plays a number 10. If he plays a number 10, he doesn't have to worry about that, and that's what Karanka was doing with him.
But I think he prefers just having that extra midfield player. He's not going to get any sort of defensive work from him whatsoever. I still think we could get some good games out of him, but especially with Samba Sow's fit, because he does cover so much ground. But I just don't think Sabri fancies him. I think he's decided that he just doesn't fit into his plans, and he'll play him if he has to, but I don't think he's in his first choice 11. So while that's the case, he's constantly losing value, and it's going to be difficult to even offload him, I think, because he's played so few games, unless it's the Olympiacos connection comes in, or the George Mendes connection, and he's able to pull a move off somewhere. I can't see a club on the open market.
If he's staying, then it's just a case of forget his transfer fee. He's an asset of the club, and over the course of and Sabri said something to this effect, didn't he, a couple of days ago, that he's an asset to the club. It's a long season. He will get a chance to come in and play some minutes. But the thing that's staring us in the face is the fact that Sabri plays a 4-1-4-1, no number 10. the attacking threat comes from Lewis Grabban as the centre forward, and then Amiobi and Lolley on the wings with overlapping fullbacks, which is a very different style of play to what we played under Karanka, and a very different style of play to what we played under O'Neill even. And of course, Carvalho didn't get a shot under O'Neill because of that. O'Neill didn't fancy him. So I think it's just a case of, wrong place, wrong time for Joao, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see the fans come around to that now. If you look at last season, Martin O'Neill was criticised left, right and centre when he wasn't playing Carvalho. Everybody had him down as the saviour and the guy who must be on the team sheet week in, week out. And then this season, people just don't seem to be as bothered that he's not in the team. And that's for two reasons. One, Sabri's doing a good job, and we're also in the playoffs and performing well and getting results. So there's probably no need to be looking at what's not on the field and saying, well, they should be in there, they should be in there. It's a slightly different situation.
I can give you two more reasons, Samba Sow and Thiago Silva.
Well, Silva gives you the best of both. He gives you that creativity and that touch of Carvalho, but he's got the work rate as well, and that's kind of what we've talked about here.
Is the difference here that, okay, again, ignore price tags, ignore the fact that Carvalho had a big value put on him and Forest paid that money. Ignore that. Is the difference that Thiago Silva is 5 years older with 5 years more experience?
Yeah, maybe. But I don't know if Joao's ever going to become that sort of player, whether he's ever going to have the physicality in his game to sort of work back and win some tackles and things. I just don't think I'm guessing he's just grown up all last 10 years or so being told you're a number 10 and you're going to play number 10, and he's gone through the system and he's probably not had any setbacks where anybody's told him, you're not a number 10. And now it's probably the first time he's playing under a system where he doesn't get to play in his favoured role, and he's finding it difficult. And the Championship is a hard league, and you mustn't forget that. It's not the same. It's the pace of it. It'll be a lot quicker than he's ever played in junior football, and so he's finding it difficult. I don't know. Maybe it's just one we're going to have to say we're going to have to write off the money eventually, and he's never going to quite fulfil the potential we hope for.
I look at it from the perspective of other teams and thinking, where could Carvalho fit in? Put him in that Wolves team, for example. Would he be a more effective player? I know Wolves play a certain way, different players, but is it a case of Joao might come into his own if and when we get into the Premier League? So is it a case of maybe looking for a loan move for him?
I mean, I personally would play Joao, especially in home games. I'd put him in there.
Where would you play him?
I'd play him number 10 and just maybe drop one of... If Samba Sow's fit, maybe drop Ben Watson or maybe drop Silva sometimes. And just
Okay, I've got an interesting one for you there. So, Ben Watson, right? The Forest style this season has been very much based upon... We've got the back four. We've got Watson playing that quarterback role, which means that when Forest are in possession, he drops deeper, the fullbacks push forward, he's an auxiliary centre-back, he wins the ball, he plays it forward, okay? Surely Forest can't play without someone doing that role, and I think it'd be a total waste of Samba Sow to make him play that role.
I think in tight home games where the opposition are just sitting there and just giving the ball to Forest, I think that's the sort of game where Joao would come in, and you don't necessarily need that defensive midfielder. I think that little bit of extra creativity and trickery there would probably see us through. But I think that would only be if Samba Sow's in the team to cover the ground. I think if he's out, then I think it would make it very difficult.
So what, maybe play a 4-2-3-1 with, I don't know, Yates and Sow in the 2, and then Carvalho's number 10 with a winger either side?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I'm losing track of the numbers now, but yeah, let's say four.
Back four, and then you've got Sow and Yates, or Sow and Semedo.
4-4-1-1, maybe, something like that. I think that would probably work well. You could have Sow and even Silva in the middle, have the two wingers, and then Carvalho just in front of them, and obviously Grabban up front.
Now, this comes back to the old question, of course. Can you have a Thiago Silva and a Joao Carvalho in the same team? Well, when we've seen it happen, it's not gone well. No.
I think only if Samba Sow's in the team. That's the only. If he's not, then no, I don't think you can. I think we look too weak. But Samba Sow is just such He reminds me of a grown man playing with sort of teenagers. He's just such a cut above everybody else. We're forgetting he did come from a high level club. He came from a team playing in Champions League football, so he's probably too good to be playing in the Championship, and we're very lucky to have Samba Sow in there.
This actually brings us back to something else that you want to talk about, Stephen. So the fullbacks are an integral part of Forest play. Yuri Ribeiro has been an absolute revelation in the first half of the season. He got crocked against Derby, and just like to remind everyone that should have been a red card, but anyway, and then hasn't played since. Is due to play at the time of recording. We are due to play Chelsea tomorrow, and it looks as though he's likely to be in the team for that match. We've missed him badly, haven't we? Because he's the only one who can provide that impetus on the left-hand side.
Yeah, where you're getting it from Matty Cash on the right-hand side, Ribeiro's the only one who really, in the squad, who can do that as a left-back. And I rate Jack Robinson, and certainly last season I thought he was very good. But when you watch Jack Robinson now, having watched Ribeiro in that position before him, you start to see the limitations of Robinson's game. You know,
But Robinson did some attacking stuff last season, didn't he? I think Robbo's having second season syndrome as actually
He's
even
not,
worse
he's,
than Lawrence.
he's not as silky or as fluent as...
No, he's not. But in terms of the running and going...
He'll put in the runs.
Yeah.
He'll put in, but it's just the quality at the end of it. Maybe the final pass. Ribeiro's more almost like a midfielder in ability-wise when it comes to passing. And
of course, Sabri has played him as a winger at times, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Which I think is a bit of a waste, to be honest. I think I'd much rather see him at left-back. But, again, you talk about Lolley and Cash on one side. Well, Amiobi's definitely suffered on the other side for not having had an overlapping fullback in that way, I think. And, I mean, it says something about Robinson, doesn't it? That Chema, who's a centre-half, has come in and actually made look like a better left-back.
Yeah, and Robinson hasn't been injured the last couple of games. It's just been, I think his form hasn't been there. So Chema's come in and he's been pretty solid. But again, it comes... what you're saying there about Amiobi, it's the balance of the whole team, where you've got Cash on one side prepared to bomb forward and offer real support from the right back position. Chema and Robinson don't seem capable of doing that. Certainly Chema, because he's a centre back by trade.
The other thing that I've noticed about Robinson is that, I mean, he's always been a walking yellow card, but he has cost us goals, a significant amount in the last month or so.
Yeah, he has, and on top of that, the draw against Middlesbrough, he was the one who was caught wrong side of the attacker, brought him down in the box, penalty, and 3 points turned into one. And that's another reason, I think, why Robinson has stood out as a weak link, because there are a lot of goals have come from that side of the pitch that Forest have conceded.
I do worry about his positional sense in the same... Actually, this isn't a worry I had before, actually, but... this season, I worry about his positional sense in the same way as I used to worry when Danny Fox used to play left-back. I thought that Danny Fox, considering we signed him as a left-back, his positional sense as a left-back and his positional awareness was absolutely awful, which is why he made a better centre-half.
And it's the same argument, but in terms of how the team operates, I suppose in the transition from defence to attack and back again, Ribeiro is just more fluid, and he just covers more ground than Robinson, and
he's also just got more quality on the ball.
More quality on the ball,
awareness and where his teammates are, what to do with it.
Yeah, and it has been very noticeable that he's not been in the team, and I would hope that keeping him fit now for the rest of the season, and certainly will be looking a lot stronger in that position. I don't think it's a position we're going to look to try and strengthen in January unless he breaks down again and he's out for a long period of time. But
I would also say that there's just for a tiny moment, there's a tiniest little bit of suggestion that maybe Chema wasn't going to hang around and he was going to be sold on in January. Can't see that happening now.
No, if he's not playing at left back, then there's potentially a spot for him at centre back.
Yeah.
If we go on to Michael Dawson, who came back into the team in December in the early games, played against Sheffield Wednesday, and then we haven't really seen him since.
No.
It's been Figueiredo and Worrell at the back. And if I'm honest, I love Michael Dawson. You know, everybody in this room knows that. But if you if you look at the performances while Dawson was out, injured, Figueiredo had not done anything wrong.
And actually, you know what?
You could make a case and say it was very harsh that he was even dropped from the side.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I thought it was harsh when Toby was taken off against Millwall to be able to swap to the back four.
Looking back in hindsight, it almost seems that we changed that 3 centre-half thing at Millwall just so we could maybe...
accommodate
Yeah, I could get away. It was a way of bringing Michael Dawson back into the team, but... Yeah,
well,
we haven't missed him.
Going back to last season, a lot was made about the fact that our win record without Dawson and with Dawson in the team, but crucial thing was that Toby Figueiredo had that freak injury that kept him out for half the season.
Yeah, he got injured almost exactly at the same time, didn't he?
Yeah, and I've long been a fan of Figueiredo. I think he's brilliant. And going back to what you said in the previous podcast, he's like the Hulk, isn't he? He's like just big, beefy man. You just wouldn't want to take him on if you're a forward. And then you combine that. It's crucial that he and Worrell look like they've got a good understanding. People talk about Forest maybe being a little bit soft at the back. I don't see that as being a big problem, to be honest. And I think that the Figueiredo and Worrell combination is working well. And
yeah, we've come a long way from the days when we had Matt Mills and Michael Mancian at the back. So yeah, I don't think the defence is much.
Which was only 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Thanks for listening to the Forest Ramble podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast provider, as this helps other Forest supporters find our content. We've got one centre forward. Rafa Mir is almost certainly going back to Wolves, and he'll probably be sent on loan back to Spain from what people are saying. Why hasn't it worked out for him?
He hasn't been given many minutes on the pitch, and when he has, it's been in tough situations, as we discussed previously. And I'm guessing that the level of criticism he's had maybe knocked his confidence a bit as well.
It's just a hard ask for a young man to. Yeah. If he's and that, let's be honest, it's not a coincidence, is it? The 4 names that we've heard as centre forwards Forest are potentially interested in, 3 of them are exceptionally experienced players: Dwight Gale, Glenn Murray, and Lucas Jukovic. And then the 4th name is Shea Adams. I'd be amazed if we signed Shea Adams. Although, of course, here's a good point to remind ourselves: we could have had him for £30,000, but Fawaz didn't want to sign him because he hadn't heard of him. So, well done on that one for us. He's a good player. I think he's the kind of player who would fit in perfectly, actually, at Forest. But Glenn Murray, as we speak... The news hot off the press is that Glenn Murray isn't in the Brighton squad, so he's almost certainly moving on. He's 36 years old, coming up to 37. One of the exceptional strikers in Championship history in the last 10 to 15 years. So would he be a great addition? Well, he'd be more likely to get some minutes playing for Forest than he would for Brighton, but would he be more likely to get some minutes playing for someone else? It's a tough ask asking someone to come in knowing they're going to be second choice striker, Stephen.
Considering he's second choice as well at Brighton now, with
he's down the pecking order, isn't he?
Yeah, will he want to move to another club and be in the exact same position? Because we are in a position where Graben is the number 1 striker, and we need somebody who can come in and compete with him, but also complement him and just offer something that perhaps he doesn't. And granted, Glenn Murray would offer that. It's just how much game time can we guarantee him? The only caveat to that, and I also would make this argument with Lucas Jukovic, is that he knows the Championship.
Yeah.
Both of those players, experienced Championship performers. Rafa Mir isn't. Mm-hmm. You could throw Jukovic or Murray into the starting lineup now and be fairly confident they'll do a good job.
Same with Dwight Gale.
Rafa Mir, not so much. Yeah, Gale as well.
I don't think you can play Gale and Graben in the same team.
You could do, but I don't think Sabri would play him. He wouldn't go that attacking.
Even at West Brom in the second half of last season, Gale ended up playing quite a lot on the right. What's the point in signing, a fox in the box goal scorer if you're not going to play him as a goal scorer? And that's the thing is that I'm concerned about. Is I don't think Gale brings enough to the table.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be a similar situation to Carvalho, where he won't want to do any defensive work and he doesn't offer any physical presence. But he will, if you give him a chance in the box, he will score a goal. He was at his best last season when Rodriguez was playing up front with him at West Brom, and
you had a 9 and 10 combo, didn't you?
And so I mean, if we wanted to go that way, I don't see any issue with that. We'd score a lot of goals, but we'd be defensively weaker, and I just don't think Sabri would want to do that. So,
I just don't think Sabri sees his players having a 9 and 10 role. I don't think that, like, Graben doesn't play as a number 9, but he doesn't play as a number 10 either. Graben does a lot of work, and he's a poacher.
I just don't think Gale's a realistic signing.
I don't. The more time goes on, the less I see him fitting in at Forest. Also, let's not ignore the fact that we'd be paying 60 grand a week for someone to not play, which seems insane. Unless you're able to guarantee that gets you automatic promotion. So the thing that I like about Adams and Gale and Adams and Jukovic and Murray is that they're all capable of doing a lot of the strength work. They're capable of doing the number 10 work as well as the number 9 work. You wanted to say something about Lucas Jukovic?
Yeah, I think he's, out of those three, I think he would be a very, very shrewd signing. I think
Didn't we almost sign him, or weren't we in the running to sign him about 4 years ago?
I think Dougie Friedman wanted him. And for one reason or another, that didn't go through. I mean, probably the embargo or, the issues that we were having with the finances at the time. But, you would see him as a kind of Dougie style of player. But the difference being, back then, he would have probably been the first choice striker, which Jukovic isn't a prolific goal scorer by any means. He scored 39 goals in 150 appearances.
He scored more goals last season than he had done in any previous seasons, hasn't he?
I think in the last 2 seasons he's really found his feet at Championship level and some consistency.
Is it also that Birmingham built their style of play around him?
Yeah, that too. But when you look at him coming into this Forest team, this Forest setup, he would work as a target man, as a player that's with strength, that leads the line. And he'd be a good option to have coming off the bench with, let's say it's 0-0 and we're playing Cardiff. And we need to find a different way of trying to break them down. Bringing him on with 20 minutes to go gives them a completely different option. And equally, if we're in front and we are defending a lead with 20 minutes to go, having him in the team for his hold-up play, for his aerial ability, even defending corners, he'd give you... And his hold-up play gives you all those options to see out a game, but he also gives you options in terms of goal scoring and finding different ways to break teams down. Look at it in a similar way. The 2 most successful Forest teams of the last 10 years had Dele Adebola and Darius Henderson as options. Not necessarily first choice. They did start some games, but coming off the bench and providing a very different option to what is your first choice striker. And I think Jukovic has played nearly 300 games in the Championship. So there's no doubt about him coming in and making an immediate impact.
Right on the Midlands. Give us a bit of balance then. Jukovic or Murray, if those were realistically on the Forest shopping list.
I think as a short-term hit, you couldn't go wrong with Glenn Murray. If we wanted to say we're going to go for promotion, he's going to guarantee you goals. That's what we struggled with.
So what it's looking like is if it's Murray, it's probably going to be a loan for the second half of the season, presumably with some kind of option. If Forest
it might even be an 18-month contract. He might want that now, that sort of security of it, and we'd sign him knowing that he'd do a job for us now, and then maybe if we do get promoted, sounds ridiculous, but if we do get promoted, he'd add that little bit of Premier League experience.
He'd be an excellent guy to have around, wouldn't he?
Yeah. So that's what Jukovic is more maybe a long-term signing.
Jukovic is, how old is he?
30.
30. Okay.
Yeah, so he'd give us maybe 2-3 years. He's maybe that's maybe us hedging our bet, saying if we don't go up, he'll be a good signing for next season as well. Because I can't see him playing in the Premier League. He's not good enough to play in the Premier League. I agree with Stephen. He brings a lot of attributes that we don't have. The hold-up play, the toughness, and he gives us another option. But he won't provide us with that many goals. And
does Glenn Murray still have the legs? Because obviously it's difficult to tell. Because he was a mainstay in the Brighton team until Potter came in, and Potter obviously plays a different style of play.
I'm sure he was playing the first few games of the season, this season as well. And last season, he was. I remember people saying if Brighton didn't have Glenn Murray, they'd be in serious trouble. So he was still there last season. And we're just going to be using him sparingly, maybe starting the odd game, coming on as sub. So I think for that he would probably still. He was never a player who relied on his pace. He more of a positional player, finding space in the box. I think that would be. I mean, before these names came up, I had a thought about Billy Sharp maybe for exactly the same reason. But I've heard Chris Wilder say he doesn't want to let him go now. But that would be a similar sort of impact as Glenn Murray.
Well, I think the advantage that Glenn Murray has and Jukovic have over Billy Sharp is physical size and stature. Billy Sharp's not that big for a centre forward.
Sure.
Glenn Murray, any defender who's playing against Glenn Murray will know about it, won't they? And same with Jukovic to a certain extent.
Yeah, and with Billy Sharp and in particular that Sheffield United team he was playing in, Chris Wilder's tactics create a lot of chances for strikers. You had even David McGoldrick banging them in for them. And I don't think that service is quite in this Forest team. This Forest team plays a different way and it relies on strikers being clinical rather than being presented with 5, 6, 7 chances a game and putting one of those away. So that's where, for me, a Glenn Murray would probably be the better option because he does provide slightly more in terms of goal return.
Yeah, okay.
Just on that as well, just while we're talking about strikers, 2 more names that I've seen linked, Lyle Taylor at Charlton and Eddie Nketiah, the Arsenal player who has now finished his loan spell at Leeds and will be looking, or I'm assuming there'll be plenty of Championship clubs looking at him and perhaps he's another option. I mean, you could potentially bring in 2 strikers. You could sign a Jukovic or a Murray and then Nketiah to give you pace and movement up front.
The problem with Nketiah would be that the reason they've called off his loan move is because he's not got the game time there. So convincing him when we've got Lewis Grabban, everybody knows he's our number 1 striker, is going to be a problem, I think. And also, if we're going for a promotion sort of thing, that maybe bringing that experienced player would be better. Lyle Taylor, I was impressed by him, and I was thinking after we played him in August, I was thinking, he'd have been a good signing for Forest, but I didn't realise he was quite how old he was. I think he's about 30 years old.
Is he?
Yeah, I thought he was about 23 years old, but making him if he's about 30 years old, it sort of flips the perspective slightly, and I think becomes a less decent signing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just having a look at a few stats here for Lewis Grabban. So that thing that you're saying about he's clinical. You know, the Blackburn matches are great. 2 goals, 2 shots. Both of his shots were on target and scored. And of course, one of those was a penalty. But he's not wasteful, is he? It's always a surprise when you see Grabban miss a chance, because if he's got a chance, usually he puts it away. And that's one of the things that I'd be more convinced about with Glenn Murray than any of the other names that are on the list. Also, just interestingly, so top scorers in the Championship in the 2010s. So number 1 was Jordan Rhodes, 107 goals. Billy Sharp was number 3 with 91. Lewis Grabban was number 5 with 85. And then equal 7th, some guy called Daryl Murphy. He'd be a good signing, wouldn't he?
Hi, everyone. This is Clint.
This is Ross.
This is Joel.
This is Cutter.
This is Tony.
From 3 Beers In.
A proud member of Big Heads Media Network.
Each episode we review local Austin craft beer and talk about
Club and Bananas.
References I don't get. And Academy Award winner Matthew McConaughey.
So tune in,
crack open a beer,
and hang out with us.
Find us on bigheadsmedia.com, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify,
or on 3beersinpodcast.com.
Another thing that we want to discuss, actually, players going out. So we've discussed Rafa Mir, Aaron Muric, likely to be going back. What went wrong there?
Getting lobbed on the first day of the season probably didn't help matters.
He looked terrible though, even the pre-season games. First, I think it was against Olympiacos. I think that was the first time I saw him, and he just didn't look like a decent goalkeeper straight away. He's just doing things that you think he just doesn't do the basics right. So,
well, I guess he's a decent goalkeeper when you're bearing in mind that Pep Guardiola still likes Claudio Bravo, and he's basically like a junior Bravo, isn't he? In the sense of
a Juliet Bravo.
A Juliet Bravo, yeah. And the big problem for Muric is that we then went out and signed a goalkeeper who's been better than him.
Yeah, and I think the difference between Bryce Samba and Muric is that Samba has just got more experience than him. Muric came to us highly rated, but didn't have.
He came to play games.
He didn't have a great deal of first team games under his belt anyway. I think he'd only played a couple of cup games for City. Granted, he'd done well, but he hadn't had a couple of seasons full of league football. Whereas at least Samba came in with that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was, I think Muric played 2 games. Did he? Did he play West Brom and Leeds?
I think it's 4 in total, including
Yeah, and then Samba was given a chance, and he hasn't looked back since.
Mm-hmm.
He's just been that good that there's been no need to think about Muric coming in and taking his place.
It's just the difference between those two is that with Muric, you could see the defenders were nervous with him in the team, and with Bryce Samba, they're confident with him in the team. He just exudes confidence, and that spreads to the rest of the players as well.
Yeah, everyone in that sort of defensive third of the pitch walks taller with knowing they've got Samba behind them, don't they?
And one of the most telling things, I think, is that towards the back end of the year, we're all looking back on the 2010s, picking our Forest teams of the decade. Most teams were looking and seriously considering Samba as the goalkeeper, which shows you the kind of impact he's had in 4 or 5 months.
Yeah,
that he's been that good that he could definitely claim to be
bearing in mind,
one of the best keepers
we've had keepers winning the Player of the Season award in the last few years. Lee Camp, Doris de Vries being the obvious ones that come to mind. Now Doris won it because he was. I guess he had a lot to do. He kept us in it when Forest weren't very good. But Lee Camp had that swagger. I think Samba in some ways is even better because Samba's really, really good with his feet. Like, you don't see Samba miss a pass, do you?
And the first goal against Blackburn, where he pings an inch-perfect ball out to Matty Cash at right back. That starts the attack, finds its way to Lolley, ball comes in, and it's a goal.
Yeah.
Pantilimon wouldn't have given you that last season.
No.
That distribution and that calmness that he has, Samba, it just spreads through the team, and it's actually quite enjoyable watching him play with the ball at his feet, his shot stopping, and then we also didn't mention the Wigan game, big save for the penalty to keep it 1-0 and keep those 3 points.
It also helps he's a character. You know, all the best goalkeepers are characters, aren't they, as well? He's like. Obviously, the other players seem to love him.
They love him. The fans love him. The fans love him.
Yeah. He loves the fans. He's having a great time with the fans at the moment. So, I guess as a footballer, you have to make hay when the sun shines on that kind of thing. Because tomorrow, you might be yesterday's man. So you mentioned the P word. Pantilimon is still at the club. Claudia Jacob is still at the club. Zach Clough is still at the club. We've also got Luke Steele and Liam Bridcut, who are on 6-month loans, who are back at the club in January. Who do we see leaving, if not all of them?
Well, I would assume that they're going to try and offload the players who are on the most wages. So I would assume that's Pantilimon. Jacob, I don't think would have come here for a small amount of pay. I think there'll be decent wages for him. It's just not worked out for him with Sabri. Sabri's not fancied him, which is a shame because I do think he's got a lot to offer, but it's better for him.
He's not mobile enough to play in a Forest midfield under Sabri Lamouchi, I don't think.
Perhaps not.
When you consider that Sabri was that quarterback himself.
Yeah, so we should be looking to move him on and free up the wage bill and get some decent money in for those. Zach Clough has just hung around the club for years on that 5-year contract that he signed when we brought him in.
It wasn't necessarily a bad signing. It was a bad signing on a 5-year contract.
Yeah, 3-year contract, 2-year contract, not so bad. As a bit of a gamble to see how he'd progress, but we've been tied down to him longer than we should have been. And then you're looking at other players like Hefele, Ben Lawan, who aren't getting game time. They should probably be moved on, or hopefully we'll be looking for other clubs now in January.
Yeah, because there's been some talk for a couple of weeks now, hasn't there, that Hefele and Ben Lawan are on their way back, but then that's it. We've not seen or heard anything more. I can't really see how they would fit back in.
It would only be an injury crisis, but with all those players, the problem's going to be finding somebody else who wants to take them on.
The other thing is, if you look at Hefele and Ben Lawan, they fall into that category of player who tends to leave each club in the same way. They have a really good start, try and build up a real rapport with the fans, and then it just kind of fades away, and then they're never picked again, and then they get moved on. Not saying that that's indicative of anything, but I'm just saying that that's something that I've noticed. And you could argue that Jakob is kind of in the same situation as well. He's kind of petered out a little bit. And Pantilimon, of course, he's had the same at every club that he's been at, certainly in this country.
I think with Pantilimon, you sort of always think he should be a better keeper than he is, just down to his sheer size, and he never quite lives up to his potential. The other players, I don't know, they've just been unlucky in a sense that we've brought in so many other centre-backs. I think we were quite happy with Ben Ayoun when he was playing last season. We weren't. I don't think we were screaming out.
He was limited, isn't he? And again, I just wonder if Sabri's style of play, Ben Ayoun, he's a big hulk, but and I guess you could say the same about Alex Milosevic. Big hulk, but does he have that much more to offer? Whereas Sabri wants his centre-backs to actually be able to do the physical work, but also be able to pass it to a teammate.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we've brought in Chema, and then you've got Dawson, Worrell and Figueiredo, we don't really have the space for any more centre-backs, and if we can get the money off the wage bill and get some funds in for them, I think that would be best for all parties. The other name that I want to bring up is John Bostock. Today he's been linked with a move to Charlton Athletic. Now, he's another one who it just hasn't worked out for him in this loan spell so far. He's coming from Toulouse, comes in with a reputation of being good on the ball, a tidy passer, maybe with some injury problems in the past and a little bit of a journeyman kind of career path. But the hope was that he could come in and provide a good option, a solid option, somebody who can use the ball well. But whether that's just down to his form not being up to scratch, or the fact that Lamouchi, having seen him now at close quarters, doesn't fancy him, he's not really had a game. And he's the only one I would look at in the team and think, if Ben Watson picks up an injury or Ben Watson came out of the team, he's the only one I could see who go into that sort of quarterback role, because he's comfortable enough on the ball to pick it up in those positions and turn and pass. But I don't know
I think he'll be pushing for a move.
He'll want to move on just to get some game time,
because I think he'll be very disappointed about having sort of come on low, and he would have had high hopes, I would have thought. I don't think he would have envisaged not even making the match day squad. So I think he'll be sort of nudging his agent to say, get me out of here.
Yeah, fair enough. Two little things just to finish off with. Is the Chelsea match tomorrow, Mode on the Midlands? Is that just a free hit?
Yeah, it is. We're going to have to make a few changes for that game, just because the players have played so many games. It's a sort of game where you can bring in, say, Dawson, change the full-backs. I think Jenkinson's fit again, so he can come in for a game. I think you've already mentioned Ribeiro might be in. So we'll make 2 or 3 changes there. Adona will get his customary cup appearance, and he might bring in Johnson as well. So yeah, they'll have to make a few changes. Sabri's made it quite clear that he doesn't think we can win it. So
he's literally said that.
When the manager's saying that, you don't hold high hopes. So I mean, I'd prefer to see our manager say, yeah, we're going to go there and try and put a good performance on, and you never know on the day. But he's just been so blatantly obvious about it. He doesn't care a jot about it. I don't hold up much. I just hope we keep him down to 3 or 4.
I think really it's a chance for your Jenkinsons and Ribeiros to get some minutes, isn't it, on their way back? Yeah. Just finally then, is Matty Cash going to play for Poland, Stephen?
Seems that way, doesn't it? He's
and should he, if he gets the chance?
It's a good question. I would rather he doesn't, because international football, it's more games. But if that's what he wants to do, you can't deny a player the opportunity to play an international, in international games. It's Although
we should point out for anyone who doesn't know that Matty Cash's mum is Polish, which is why he qualifies. And the word on the street is that there is some interest from the Poland national team in maybe wanting to see about whether he'd be interested in playing with a view to the forthcoming tournament in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if he gets the opportunity, it would be good for him and for the club, because it would make him a better player. He would play with better players, and for the club in general, it would, being in an international football, it would raise his value as well if it ever came to a time of selling him. So if he gets the opportunity, I don't think it's that 1 or 2 more games in the season is going to hinder him too much.
The argument with that, though, is if he is or has thought about playing for England in the past, the way he's come on this season and he continues to develop, he's only getting better. Now, could he declare for Poland and then suddenly he's getting better, and then suddenly he's England standard, and he might think, oh, well, I could have played for England. It is a long way off right now, but the way if he carries on progressing the way he has and continues to develop and learn, and let's say Forest do get into the Premier League, he would probably be the starting right back in a Premier League team. And then who knows? Anything's possible for him.
Do we see Cash not moving further up the pitch again? Like, if Jenkinson comes back and Dirikwa come back and they're both fit and playing reasonably well, would Matty Cash play on the wing again?
I wouldn't like to see it based upon the fact he's done so well at right back. Why change it? When you've got Lolley and you've got Adoma and you've even got Alex Myton in the wings who could play on the right-hand side of midfield, I don't see why you would take Matty Cash and move him when he's playing so well at right back. I think you're just creating another selection issue where there isn't one if you do that.
I think if Jenkinson gets fit, it'll give us an opportunity to alternate between Lolley and Cash in the second half of the season. It'll just keep both of them a little bit fresher. As a right back, as a full back, his ability is above average, but as an attacking player, I think it's not quite as high as he need for your first choice winger. So I don't know. I see him sort of probably holding on to that right back place for the rest of the season.
He's just been too good there to not play, hasn't he?
Yeah, he gives you that forward momentum that we sort of been crying out for all season.
And when he's dovetailing so well with Lolley in front of him, it seems you wouldn't want to change it, would you?
No.